Thank you, Daphna. I would only add that Eugene is good, and please God, he'll be able to join us at next year's gathering. I'm also pleased to introduce you to two of my colleagues that are here with us tonight, Deborah Hochberg from the Paul Singer Foundation and Daniela Condell from Startup Nation Central. So, Atar, my version of Houston, we have a problem, is related but has a little bit of a different angle. At Startup Nation Central, we are hosting at a pretty steady clip multinationals, investors, governments that visit Israel from abroad in order to peek under the hood of the innovation story. And we give this signature sort of overview of the innovation scene here. We talk about some of the pretty impressive data around it, 5,000 startups and innovative companies, the most venture per capita being raised by Israeli companies than any other countries in the world, and of course the rankings where Israel continues to do extremely well. Most recently there was a World Economic Forum ranking published at Davos. Out of 139 countries ranked for innovation, Israel came in as number 2. So all of this is impressive. Invariably, at the end of this talk that we give, someone raises their hand and says, so what's the weakness? Where's your vulnerability? And I think everyone in this room knows that the answer is human capital. Does anyone here know who said this line? I'm going to test some of the history buffs. We are being afflicted with a new disease, technological unemployment. This means unemployment due to our discovery of means of economizing the use of labor, outrunning the pace at which we can find new uses for labor. Anybody? Okay. So it was John Keynes, the British economist, spoken in 1930. The more radical version of this were the Luddites in the UK in the early 1800s. They went around smashing machines. So you could ask, what's the issue with human capital? What's the problem that both of them were speaking to? Technology and machines will replace workers, they said, and workers won't have anything to do. If you look back in history, actually they were both wrong, both Keynes the economist and the Luddites, because until a few years ago when we had the economic crisis, the labor force just kept growing and growing. But more recent example is Larry Summers, who's the former Secretary of the Treasury and former president of Harvard. And he predicted, indeed, knowing that they were both wrong, he said that we're about to see a chronic shortage of unemployment for all but the most skilled of workers. Now, here we want to take a look at what are the trends going on in the world. We're obviously going to see dramatic leaps, even leapfrogs in technology. Every aspect of our lives is going to see change and disruptive change. So if you look at number 3 here, you could even say that every aspect of our lives will be rendered unrecognizable. Education, healthcare, defense, transportation, jobs, welfare, and the list goes on. What this also means is that a lot of jobs and disciplines that we know today will disappear. There was a recent Oxford University study that said 47% of the disciplines that we know of today are going to disappear. Truly terra incognita. So then you have Israel. And the question is, how does all this play out here? So first of all, Israel, as you know, has a unique ability to manage the unknown. Some call it our secret sauce. In some ways, when you think about it, Israel itself was a startup. We also managed to make the desert bloom. We became world leaders in water desalination and reuse in a country with scant water resources. So Israel has a small but developed innovation ecosystem with a culture of adaptability and speed. So it's possible that Israel may not suffer from some of these changes that are about to come across in larger countries. But, and this is a big but, our ability to withstand the storm ahead depends on how we handle human capital. And this is not an issue we can afford to be cavalier about. Now, just to drill down, in some ways, I see this as the launch point for the next 2 days of the conference that we're embarking on. This is what I call the kind of DNA of the Israeli economy. You have an export, meaning isolated economy, that sometimes is actually impacted by geopolitical changes. In this case, you could substitute the word BDS. Two separate economies. In other words, very, very different culture in our two economies. Even if you put high-tech and practic tech together and call it the innovation economy, there's much less regulation, much greater competition, lower taxes in the innovation economy. And the rest of the economy, of course, is the opposite. High level of inequality and unique demographics. Now, this is a point I think that came up repeatedly in some of the materials that were prepared for the conference, just in terms of the demographic, okay? So over here you have about 2/3 of the workforce are sort of other Israelis, and about 1/3 at this point are Arabs and Haredim. You fast forward to 2029, and you see the shift here, where about 50% or close to 50% of the workforce will be made up of Arabs and Haredim. It's a powerful challenge and something I'll come back to in a couple of minutes. I'll just leave you with one data point here, is that those communities today tend to be 70% less productive than other communities. Then you have the aging population. You can see that Israel's done pretty well until now, just in terms of the ratio between the older and the younger population. But as you can see, 2030, that number starts to get a little weaker. This one is interesting, and I think that everyone here understands the reason behind it. Because of the mandatory conscription, not only do you go to the army, but then you do a trip around the world for a year to chill out after the army. And then there's the higher education. So by the time Israelis are entering the workforce, much later age, 29, compared to OECD countries, which is 26. Now here's where you start to see the crunch, okay, in higher education. You have, in certain cases, more graduates than are needs in the market. And we put biology here not by accident, because there happens to be a surplus of biology graduates, versus a deficit in the number of graduates as compared to the needs of the market in other areas. Obviously, that's specifically in computer science. So, if you want to talk about the defining challenge, Israel's innovation economy needs human capital. This reminds me of the story that we tell of the beginnings of the startup ecosystem here in the early 90s. There were hundreds of new startups flourishing, opening, and burgeoning. But there was no venture capital system, no VC scene in order to give the oxygen of funding for all these startups. And that's when you saw massive government intervention with the creation of the Yozma Fund. I'm sure that the Israelis in the room will remember that and see. And that was literally a government project which gave matching funds to VCs that would set up in Israel in order to create a venture capital scene here. That gave oxygen to the startups. Now, the other piece I'm just going to point out here is that if you're also defining the problem, the numbers are not adding up already today. In the Shutafim report that was prepared for the conference, and Attar just referred to it, it references some 7,000 positions opening up every year in the tech sector, and then 10,000 positions in the practic tech sector. And what are the graduates that are meeting that need? Well, start with high school, no more than 6,600 graduates a year that are proficient in maths and science. But then even that number goes down to about 4,500 that are coming out of computer science programs every year. So obviously, a big issue that I just did the tip of the iceberg is leakage. And the question is, where is the leakage happening and who is leaking? This here shows, I know it's a lot of text, but it just shows all the different reasons along the way of the STEM pipeline that's exhibiting all this leakage, whether it's Arab graduates from the Technion. There's a data point we used earlier today. There are 20% engineering, 20% of all the engineering graduates from the Technion are Arabs. Something like 3% of them are making it into the high-tech sector. Many of them are going on to become high school students. So you've got the leakage. The main areas... Yeah, what did I say? Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. And the main populations that are not making it down into the workforce and then the 40 plus and so on are, again, Arabs, Haredim, Ethiopians, many women, and also 45 plus is a big challenge. Now, this is the STEM pipeline that was referred to earlier, that was prepared for the conference. As everyone here knows, this pipeline starts at a very early age, okay? I know we like to talk about it as elementary school and middle school and high school, but at a lunch we had today with a couple of people in this room, the point was made that cognitively, this is a training that needs to start between the ages of 1 and 3 years old. But here you show in the pipeline the education system, the Army service, higher education, and finally joining the workforce. The focus at this conference is really on the first 2 stages of the pipeline. But like you, we at Startup Nation Central care about the entire pipeline. Our focus, though, is on that last mile. It's on making sure that we work with multiple partners to ensure that what the pipeline is producing is actually fitting into tomorrow's labor force. So to give you one small example of collaboration that may be relevant to many of you, we joined with some other NGOs and some members from industry to sit on a committee of VATAT, which is the Council for Higher Education, which is literally determining the number of spaces in every computer science program in universities. And the goal of this VATAT effort is to increase the number of computer science graduates by 45% in the next 5 years. So this slide shows, if you again, I'm just looking at the bottom part here, how we are thinking about this. And the key here is on collaboration, on finding possible interventions that are both wide scale and scalable. And the other key piece here is that the coordination that we do on preventing the leakage here is both done within each phase of the pipeline and between the different phases of the pipeline. Practically speaking, I'm just going to throw out a couple of examples of projects that we're currently engaged in the human capital space. Again, just to give you something to think about and by all means to consider working together. One is a mapping, okay? It's an annual mapping of the industry needs, which is something that we are going to make sure is distributed in a wide scale. And the second one is preparing a platform. We're going to call it a placement platform, so that potential employers can be connected systematically with members of these underrepresented populations. So as we partner with other NGOs and governments and philanthropy and first and foremost in our case with industry, we invite all of you here to work together to ensure that the workers are skilled enough to join the innovation economy, which in turn is critical for the future of Israel's economic security. Above all, I'm going to say on a personal note, as someone who has 3 teenage daughters, I think that everyone here would agree that we all want our kids and our grandkids, and I'm looking now at Leah, Shachar, and Tamar, no pressure, are actually trained and positioned to be productive members of tomorrow's workforce, and that we're all able to ensure that future generations can flourish even in terra incognita. Thank you very much.